Part 1. The arrival at Ashford Manor. The rain fell in thin, misty sheets over the English countryside, draping the hills in a veil of grey. As the old train screeched to a halt at the tiny station of Ashford, Henry Whitmore adjusted his overcoat and stepped onto the platform. A retired American naval officer, Henry had come to England to enjoy a quiet holiday, though he suspected quiet might not last long in a place like Ashford Manor. The invitation had come unexpectedly, a letter penned in elegant handwriting by Lady Margaret Ashford herself. Henry had met her years ago in London at a dinner party, and though they had corresponded only occasionally, her tone in the letter had been urgent. She asked him to spend a fortnight at her estate, citing matters of delicate importance. Intrigued, Henry agreed. A carriage awaited him, driven by a stern-faced man in a dark livery. Without a word, the driver lifted Henry's luggage and set it beside him. The road from the station wound through dense woods, and after half an hour, the trees parted to reveal Ashford Manor. The manor loomed against the stormy sky, its grey stone walls streaked with centuries of rain, its many chimneys belching faint wisps of smoke. Windows glowed warmly, though there was something about the house that seemed watchful, as if it guarded secrets older than its inhabitants. Inside, the grand hall was lit by chandeliers. Henry was greeted by Lady Margaret herself, a woman of 60 with sharp eyes and a smile that concealed as much as it revealed. She welcomed him with a graciousness befitting her station, though Henry noticed a tension in her posture. "You are most kind to come," she said, pressing his hand. "There is much I must discuss with you. But first, you must meet the others." The others turned out to be an eclectic gathering. In the drawing room sat Sir Edmund Hargrave, Lady Margaret's brother, a retired judge with a booming voice; Clara Ashford, Lady Margaret's niece, a striking young woman with an aloof air; Dr. Stephen Collins, the family physician, lean and precise, with an unsettling gaze; Reverend Paul Jennings, a mild, nervous man whose hands trembled when he lifted his teacup; Mr. Arthur Bellamy, a jovial businessman, though his laughter seemed a shade too loud. Dinner that night was rich and elaborate, though conversation drifted uneasily. A remark from Clara would draw a sharp retort from her uncle, a casual question from Henry was met with silence. At last, Lady Margaret raised her glass. "I am glad you are all here," she said. "For there are matters in this house that cannot remain hidden much longer." Her words fell into the air like stones into a pond. The room grew still. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and Henry felt a strange chill run down his spine. Something, he realized, had already begun. Part 2. Whispers in the dark. That night, the manor seemed alive with sounds: creaking beams, whispering drafts, and the distant chime of a grandfather clock. Henry lay awake in his chamber, unable to ignore the uneasy air that had settled since Lady Margaret's words at dinner. Sometime after midnight, he rose and stepped quietly into the corridor. The gas lamps flickered low, casting long shadows across the patterned carpet. Somewhere below, voices murmured. Curious, Henry descended the grand staircase, careful to keep his steps light. The voices came from the library. The heavy door was ajar, and Henry, unwilling to intrude yet unable to resist, lingered just outside. "We cannot let her reveal it," a man's voice hissed. "She already suspects," came another, softer voice. "If she speaks, it will ruin us all." Henry leaned closer, but at that moment the door clicked shut from within. The murmurs ceased. He stood frozen in the corridor, the silence pressing on him like a weight. The next morning brought no clarity. The household assembled for breakfast, but tension lingered. Clara sat pale and distracted, her spoon idle in her bowl. Sir Edmund barked at a servant for pouring his tea too slowly. Dr. Collins observed the room with his narrow eyes, as though he alone possessed knowledge the rest lacked. Henry decided to walk the grounds after the meal, hoping fresh air would steady his mind. The gardens of Ashford Manor were overgrown but beautiful, a tangle of roses, ivy, and mossy statues. As he strolled, he found Clara standing by the fountain, staring into the water. "You didn't sleep," Henry said gently. She turned, startled. For a moment, her composure cracked, and he glimpsed raw fear. "No," she whispered. "None of us do, these days." Henry frowned. "Because of Lady Margaret's announcement." Clara's lips tightened. She should not have said anything. "Now it will begin again." "Begin again?" Henry asked, but before Clara could reply, Sir Edmund's voice rang across the garden, summoning her sharply. She obeyed without a word, leaving Henry with more questions than answers. That evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Lady Margaret gathered the guests once more in the drawing room. She stood by the fireplace, her face pale but resolute. "There is something in this house," she began, "something tied to the night my late husband died. His death was ruled natural, but I have long believed otherwise. And I believe," her voice faltered, "that one among us knows the truth." Gasps broke the silence. The fire crackled, and thunder shook the windows. Henry glanced around the room. Every face was a mask: shock, anger, fear, but none of them convincing. He had been in enough interrogations during his naval years to know when people were hiding something. And here, in Ashford Manor, it seemed everyone was. Part 3. The gathering storm. The morning after Lady Margaret's declaration, the manor felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were pressing secrets down upon its inhabitants. The storm had passed, leaving the garden slick and shining under a weak, grey sun. Henry rose early and found Dr. Collins already inspecting the library, his hands meticulously dusting the shelves. "Morning, Doctor," Henry said. Dr. Collins turned sharply, his gaze sharp as a scalpel. "Morning, Mr. Whitmore. Disturbing night, wasn't he? Its secrets have a way of speaking louder than the wind." Henry raised an eyebrow. "I heard voices in the corridor last night." "Were you alone in the library?" Collins hesitated, then nodded. "Alone, yes. But I heard them too, the murmur of old arguments, voices of those who fear exposure. Secrets never die, Mr. Whitmore. They wait." Henry's attention was drawn to the gathering in the drawing room. All the guests assembled once more, tension etched into every line of their faces. Sir Edmund Hargrave scowled at Clara Ashford, who avoided his gaze. Arthur Bellamy sat with arms crossed, his laughter from yesterday replaced by tight silence. Even the Reverend Jennings seemed anxious, twisting his fingers as though the very act might protect him. Lady Margaret stood at the head of the room. "I have searched through the papers left by my late husband," she said. "Among them, I found correspondence that hints at a betrayal. Betrayal so cunning that it has remained hidden for decades. And I fear that tonight, its consequences will reveal themselves fully." Gasps filled the room. "Consequences?" Henry asked under his breath. Clara leaned toward him, whispering, "He was a cruel man, but not everyone he wronged is here. Some sins travel quietly, until they strike." The afternoon passed slowly. Henry wandered the manor, observing each guest in turn. Subtle gestures, sidelong glances, even the way they carried themselves told stories of guilt and anxiety. By evening, Lady Margaret called for dinner. The storm outside had returned, lightning flashing across the sky, illuminating the manor's Gothic windows. As the guests gathered, Henry noticed a letter lying on the sideboard, its seal broken. "It was not here before," he murmured to Dr. Collins, who only shrugged. Dinner began with strained politeness, but soon the atmosphere thickened. Sir Edmund demanded to see financial records, accusing Arthur Bellamy of mismanagement. Clara remained quiet, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Collins sipped his wine slowly, observing, calculating. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a few seconds. A scream rang out, a soft, strangled cry that came from the corridor. The lights returned, revealing the Reverend Jennings pale and trembling. Who was that?" he stammered. No one answered. Henry felt a chill. Someone in Ashford Manor had reason to fear discovery, and the manor itself seemed to conspire with them, its long hallways echoing secrets too dark to voice. Tonight, he knew, something would happen, something that could not be undone. As the guests retired, the manor grew quiet again. But Henry remained in the drawing room, his eyes on the broken seal of the mysterious letter. It was clear, whoever had removed or altered it had done so with purpose. The game was on, and the stakes were deadly. Part 4. The Unmasking. The next morning, Ashford Manor was cloaked in a pale fog. Henry Whitmore moved quietly through the halls, his thoughts focused on the broken letter and the strange events of the previous night. Something about the manor's atmosphere pressed down upon him, a weight of anticipation, as if the house itself was holding its breath. He entered the library, where Dr. Collins was already poring over the papers. "I trust you slept well?" Henry asked, trying for lightness, but the doctor only gave a thin smile. "No rest until truth is revealed," Collins replied. "Secrets like these cannot remain buried. They will surface, whether you are ready or not." Henry nodded. Indeed, the stakes were high. He had begun piecing together the fragments of conversation, the subtle gestures, the tensions between the guests. It was in the drawing room, just before breakfast, that Henry decided to confront them. He stood tall, letting his gaze sweep across the assembled figures. "Last night," he began, "someone took a letter from this house that was meant to expose a betrayal. I have reason to believe that this act was deliberate, and that it was done to conceal a crime far worse than mere deceit." The room stiffened. Sir Edmund's hand twitched. Clara Ashford's lips pressed into a thin line. Arthur Bellamy's laughter from yesterday was gone, replaced by tight silence. Even Reverend Jennings seemed unsure of where to look. Henry continued, "Each of you had motive. Sir Edmund feared scandal. Clara, you feared the revelation of past wrongs. Bellamy's finances might have been ruined. And yet, one of you crossed the line into murder." A gasp echoed from the corner. Lady Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Henry, you speak of murder," she said, voice trembling. "Do you truly believe?" Henry turned to her. "I do. And I intend to prove it." He asked each guest to recount their movements during the previous night. The responses were careful, rehearsed, and in some cases, contradictory. But the crucial detail emerged from Clara Ashford, who finally admitted to leaving her room under cover of darkness to retrieve a package she believed contained proof of her innocence from years ago. Henry's gaze sharpened. "And what package might that have been, Miss Ashford?" She hesitated, then whispered, "A letter, from my late uncle, Sir Reginald. I thought it contained the truth about the scandal he accused me of." The pieces began to fall into place. Someone had intercepted the letter, removed its contents, and left the envelope to be discovered later. Henry called everyone together in the main hall. "The murderer," he announced, "is not who you might expect. The act was premeditated, calculated, and clever. The culprit knew that fear could be used as a weapon, that tension alone would mask the truth. But tonight, the truth will be revealed." With that, he presented a small drawer he had discovered in Sir Reginald's desk earlier, a hidden compartment containing the missing letter, detailing both financial and personal betrayals. He held it aloft. "The handwriting is unmistakable," Henry said. "And the content implicates one of you. The person who took this letter last night believed they could manipulate events, but they underestimated the reach of observation and deduction." Sir Edmund's face went pale. Clara's eyes widened. Bellamy's hands shook. And Dr. Collins, who had seemed calm, finally faltered. "The letter, Inspector." I took it," Collins stammered. "I only intended to prevent scandal, not murder. But when Sir Reginald confronted me, I panicked. The poison was meant for myself, as a bluff, to protect my secret. I did not think it would, oh, heavens, I did not." Henry nodded grimly. "The truth is harsh, Doctor, but confession spares lives from continued deception. You acted out of fear, but fear has a price." The manor was silent. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows. Inside, the tension slowly ebbed as the revelation settled. The unmasking was complete, but the story was far from simple. Each guest now carried the weight of knowing how fragile the line between secrecy and disaster could be. Part 5. Final twist at midnight. Night fell over Ashford Manor like a velvet curtain. The storm had returned, lightning flashing intermittently across the sky and illuminating the manor's imposing silhouette. Henry Whitmore walked the corridors, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. Dr. Collins' confession had solved the immediate mystery, but something in the manor's atmosphere still felt unresolved, as if the house itself knew more than anyone admitted. At precisely midnight, Henry heard a soft creak on the stairs. He followed the sound to the drawing room, where he found Lady Margaret standing alone, her eyes fixed on the fireplace. "Henry," she whispered, "there is one last secret. One I have kept from everyone, even you." Henry raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" Lady Margaret reached for the mantel and pulled aside a loose panel. Behind it was a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. She handed it to Henry. "This," she said, "is the true account of Sir Reginald's final days. Not the letter, not the poison, something else entirely. Read it carefully." Henry opened the journal. Inside, he found meticulous entries, revealing not only the financial deceptions and personal betrayals but also a shocking truth: Sir Reginald had staged part of his own death. The illness that had appeared fatal had been fabricated, a ruse to expose those who would betray him. The poison, the hidden letters, the midnight confessions, it was all part of an elaborate plan to root out treachery. Henry's eyes widened. So, he knew it would lead to Collins' confession. Lady Margaret nodded. And more. He trusted that fear would reveal hearts, but not destroy them. Only one mistake changed everything: the letter left the drawer too soon. Otherwise, the truth would have remained under his control. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the room. Henry turned sharply. Sir Reginald himself stood in the doorway, very much alive, a faint smile on his face. "You see," he said, "a staged death teaches lessons that mere warnings cannot. Fear sharpens the senses, and truth emerges under pressure. But beware, secrets have a life of their own. Henry stepped back, astonished. Colin's panic, the stolen letter, the midnight confessions, all were part of a drama carefully orchestrated by Sir Reginald. The murder, the fear, the suspense, they had been instruments, not ends. Sir Reginald chuckled softly, fading into the shadows of the hallway. Outside, lightning split the sky. Henry closed the journal and turned to Lady Margaret, who looked both relieved and triumphant. The manor was quiet again. But now, the silence was not oppressive. It was thoughtful, deliberate, a house that had witnessed deceit, panic, and confession, and had survived to teach its lesson. Henry knew that Ashford Manor would remain in his memory forever, not only for its mystery and danger but for the reminder that truth, however cleverly hidden, always finds a way to surface. And sometimes, the dead are not quite as dead as they seem.